Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Peaky Blinders. So, this, of course, is a pilot episode of Peaky Blinders, ultimately on Netflix. So, really, I would immediately say right out of the gate, I'm wanting to try to figure out how exactly I can fit my interest into this show. Just go on and be like, like maybe I can figure out, I can put the puzzle pieces together to see how I can be more interested in this show. Because I think right out of the gate in this first episode, there isn't that there. Like, to me, I can feel like this show feels like Yellowstone if it was done in a certain time period, possibly like in between, somewhere between the 18 and 1900s, somewhere around there, somewhere around possibly when like the Noobsies were a thing at some point for their play, because I think that takes place in like 1899, maybe somewhere around there. So, and I feel like this has this kind of like wardrobe and style for that time period. But let me know in the comments below if they say exactly like, oh, this takes place in 1842. I'm like, okay, that's great. Because I don't know. I don't know much. I don't know about time period and whatever and wardrobe and all that gibbity goop. So, going into this episode, I want to immediately say there's some visually interesting things here. Um, I like the fact that we have this Shelby family, as this is going to be like the teeing up of this part of this show, where we have the Shelby family who are to be the Peaky Blinders, and they're to, of course, to be controlling the bidding of horse races. So it seems that we have this one specific horse that is to be showcased, that maybe there's to possibly be some shenanigans going on with this horse to maybe think that there's a possibility that this horse is going to win over any others, and so on and so forth. And so we all of a sudden go on, and like, interestingly enough, we have it to where the inspector in the story, who is to be played by Sam Neill, is actually the bad guy in the story, which is kind of interesting. I kind of like the fact that, like, because we've seen too many shows where the good guy always prevails, it's kind of nice to kind of turn it on to its side and have it be where it's like you're rooting for the villain in this story and not the bad guy or the good guy. Um, and technically, we can see Sam Neill's character as Inspector Chester Campbell, who could be like getting his hands dirty, trying to come up with where, of course, his shipment is to, of course, be in this episode. So, but we'll get into that. So, when we get into spoilers, of course. So, I would say that this show so far is like the normal pilot episode where you have to get to know frickin' everybody and their brother. Uh, like, if I hadn't said it before, this feels like a Yellowstone thing, and it just kind of feels like uh, I'm going to have to eventually get to figure out what my interest can be for this show, because I just don't feel it's quite there yet, because for every pilot episode of every show, I'm just like, and then eventually I watch more episodes, I'm like, oh my god, maybe I can watch more of this, or eventually I slowly but surely just go into like, yeah, I still don't get the show, I still don't know, and it gets to the point where eventually it goes on and just has me lose interest in it, for whatever reason, even if it's a big, massively popular thing. It's just like, man, these episodes are just like an arduous process to just want to find my enjoyment. But I'm willing to go on and try that upon this show. It's a really interesting Netflix show, so we'll see where that goes. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this one. Let's go out of our way to say that I've seen this episode because I have. Hopefully, I'll be able to do it justice because there's a lot of moving parts within this show because there's so many things to talk about. So, without a doubt, let's go into that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So, we, of course, at the very beginning of this episode have, of course, a guy called uh, Mr. Zhang who goes with a girl, I believe her name is Finn, and she, of course, is to be this girl who, of course, is to be this witch, and okay, maybe I'm wrong about that. We have Mr. Zhang who goes on to see to go on to see Thomas Shelby, and this girl is supposedly some fortune teller, some witch, and so Thomas is to bring her this horse called the uh, Monaghan boy or the Monahan boy. So we have Thomas who's saying that this girl is some fortune teller, some witch, and so these people who I guess are to be Chinese, I'm not going to confirm that. We have them going and like tossing over a baby. Well, not tossing. That sounds awful. Handing over a child to have some other woman feed this child, so to speak, and we have one guy saying like, "Hey, where are you going?" And they, of course, are saying that Thomas is to be asking for them. So, hence why they are running to find Thomas. So, Thomas again is to say like, "Oh, you must be the fortune teller. What can you do to help my one horse?" So this girl is to go and take this red thing of sand and blow into this horse, and so all of a sudden we have it to where Thomas is telling all the people in this garrison court, "Hey guys, like, any you women you want to go and place bets, like, that's fine. Like, anybody is like is thinking that this horse is lucky or special or whatever, then like place your bets." So we go and have Thomas like, and there isn't a saddle on this horse. Like, Thomas is just riding this, I think, like bareback is the term. So Thomas is just going on and like, because he still has like the reins part of it, but he just doesn't have a saddle weirdly. So Thomas is going through this town, and with how this town is kind of set up at some points, I'd be worried that this horse would just like especially when they get to those parts where there's like flames coming in and out of that one section. I'm like, dude, I would be worried that my horse would just be like and like fall over, or the horse would just like freaking just walk all over me or something as I'm falling backwards, or the horse would just go on and just like do any number of things. But it seems like this horse was very calm for, and that was great. So so we go on and we have Thomas who is going through this part of town showcasing us like, and I'm like, man, this place is like really beautiful looking. We have places where a number of buildings are being put together and constructioned and whichever. So we have Thomas going further and further into the Peaky Blinders building. I don't know if that's the exact term, but it's where all of them are at. So we go on and we have Thomas who's making his way to spot that a number of people are going on and mentioning that, hey, like, we're getting a lot of bids on Monahan Boy, and like, so this is great. So we go on and we have Thomas who's speaking to Arthur, and Arthur is to be the guy that is to basically be like, hey, I heard this happened. Confirm to me why that this is happening. So Because we have Arthur telling Thomas, it's like, well, hey, like, I heard that you had been talking to some Chinese people over by Garrison Court. Why? And so Thomas is saying because he wants this horse to seem lucky or seem like he's trying to put a spell upon this horse to make more people bid. And so Arthur is like, well, that seems like a risky thing. But because what if this horse does win? Then we're going to go on and uh, now we're going to go on and have a horse that is to seem like magically lucky. And so towards the later part of this episode, we do find out the Monahan boy had won. And Arthur's like, well, Thomas, what are you going to do about that now? Like, you've made this horse seem magical. And Thomas is like, well, yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to keep having this horse win. We're going to have him win twice. And then on the third time, when everybody's thinking like, oh my god, this horse is going to go the distance. Oh my god, this horse is going to go and whichever. Thomas is then going to turn around and have somehow or another this horse lose. Probably on purpose. To rig this thing so that way everybody in their town would be thinking, oh yeah, we're going to bid on this one horse because it's a guaranteed win. And then all of a sudden we turn around and have this horse just lose. Then everybody's like, oh no, how could you? Monahan boy. So, now that we have that story out of the way, so Thomas goes on and is to go and talk to a number of people. Because Thomas is to go on and make it to this bar where we go on and have a guy named Freddie Thorne who, of course, is talking to these men and talking about going on strike. I don't know what exactly business he's in quite yet, but whatever he's doing, he wants to go on strike. Because we also have it to where it seems that there is a Inspector Chester Campbell coming to town from Belfast to go on and kind of see if there might be certain people already that the inspector could go on and think could possibly be in suspicion of this possible case that he's involved in. So, and we also have it where Arthur is mentioning something coming about Belfast, but we don't know what that really means until later on. So, we of course have Thomas who's talking to Freddy at this bar. And so we go on and we have them exchanging pleasantries. And so all of a sudden we have a guy named Danny that rushes into this bar, all of a sudden knocking all of this beer over, and for some reason in this guy's head, he's immediately thinking that he is in France, which he isn't. So we go on and we have Thomas trying to desperately remind Danny that he is not actually in France. So we of course go on and tell we have these guys, of course, convince Danny that he's not in France anymore because I guess these guys had to go to war with France, and there had been a battle that, of course, had driven these men crazy to the point of even Thomas at one point is having nightmares about him battling in France, to where it seems like he's like waking up in a cold sweat simply because of that war. To where we have to where Freddy is saying at one point to Thomas, it's like, well, yeah, maybe sometime in the future you're going to go on and put a bullet into Danny's head to be like the old Yeller kind of moment where we go on and we have Danny has gone on and like created too much damage in town or has done something wrong, and maybe Thomas will have to go on and do that to Freddy also. So later on in this show, we end up finding out that Freddy is to actually be with a girl named Ada Shelby, who of course is to be with the Peaky Blinders, the Shelby family, or of course with guys like Thomas and Arthur. We go on, we have Freddy and Ada, who are kind of sneaking around with this relationship to them going to this bar or going on to this movie theater and just trying to like sneak around with their relationship. And so Ada is wanting to go on and just like, when are we just going to reveal like we're a couple? And Freddy's like, soon. But I think Freddy also likes the fact that they're sneaking around with this. So pushing on. So we eventually go on and have Danny in this episode, who, because I'm jumping around a little bit. It's not going to be perfect like the episode, because there's a lot to just talk about, anyways. So Danny goes on and is to, of course, have him like think that this is France yet again. So all of a sudden we have this Italian man who I guess to have this looks like a restaurant, and so we have Danny sitting in these chairs, and because Danny is sitting in this chair, we have this, of course, Italian man who is to go on and try to get Danny from out of this seat. To where all of a sudden this guy is to whip out this knife, and so Danny is to go on and take this knife and stab this guy into his chest and kill him off, and then Danny runs away. So since people are to find out that Danny was to kill this guy, we of course have Thomas later on in the episode go and have these Italians see that Thomas is going to shoot Danny to have him fall into this boat. And I'm like, this feels like the end of the Gotham pilot episode, where we of course have it where Commissioner Gordon is shooting Penguin and he falls over into this water, but we instead find out that like the Penguin is still alive. And so we have that same kind of thing here with Danny, where we have one shell that is to be blasting this blood, and Danny falls over, but Danny is not actually dead. And Danny is to be used to go off and do some mission where Charlie Strong is to kind of tell him what to do next, and that he's going to be a Peaky Blinder to thank Thomas for what he had done by saving his life, as the Italians were to seemingly be okay with what had happened there, thinking that Danny was dead and it wasn't the truth. So we go on in this episode, and so Inspector Chester Campbell is to go into this precinct and is to do this whole long stretch of speech and whatever going on, because Thomas is to say that he is to have paid off a number of these coppers, as they are to call them. So Inspector Chester Campbell is going on and saying to these men, it's like, well, hey, like, you guys have probably accepted a number of bribes from any number of people to get away with any number of things. and you are worse than they are. And he just goes on and on and on about how these police officers are worse than they are. So we have Inspector Chester that is to bring in a number of men that are to be like God fearing men that are to, I guess, be good men. And of course, these are men that he can trust. So we are going to have these men replace those men, and they're all going to be sweared in and deputized and whatever for him to be working with alongside them to kind of get this, kind of nip this all in the bud and get rid of all this crime. So we go on and have Inspector Chester that is to go and find Arthur Shelby at some movie theater because I guess he is to go into this movie theater before everyone else does. So Arthur is to, of course, have two women at his side, and so we have Arthur who is telling these women, like, hey, before all these other people end up coming into this movie theater, you both better give me a pretty good BJ. And so all of a sudden, the inspector is to go and grab Arthur and to start to beat him up, um, as well as any number of other inspectors. We have Inspector Chester that is to go on and is to, I think, break one of Arthur's fingers trying to get information about this shipment. And so Arthur is to give up nothing because he honestly doesn't know anything about this shipment. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I will tell you what that shipment is about because really Chester's go on with Arthur, but Arthur doesn't know anything. And so the more and more that this inspector goes and is to question this guy, it's like, well, you know what? Like, I believe you. I can believe you. So we go on and we have Thomas who is talking to his aunt or aunt, if I can find Aunt Polly, who has gone on and is to ridicule one of her family members, which I believe is John, for having one of his guns just lying around for some other girl to possibly pick it up and accidentally shoot somebody or shoot herself. So Aunt Polly is to talk to Thomas, and so Thomas is to mention that he was to go and try to take this shipment of, I believe, what he was to think was alcohol, and instead the men that he was working with, I guess he was to realize that these guys were really drunk, and he finds out that instead they took this other shipment of machine guns that I guess were possibly for the military. So we of course have Aunt Polly who's telling Thomas, like, well, hey, you need to get rid of that. Like, that's freaking the worst thing that you can possibly take because you probably had taken this from the military, and they're gonna go and figure out, and they're gonna find out like what happened to this. They're gonna go on and like hang anybody that was involved in this. So like you got to get rid of this as quickly as possible. So we go on later in the episode. We of course have Thomas, who is speaking with Charlie here, Charlie Strong, and we of course have Thomas that is to do what she says to have this crate being easily found by a number of people, and that's what they should try to do. But Thomas is like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. Thomas is going to go and hide this thing so that way these people will have to, one way or another, pay for it. Pay for this thing to be found. So we have, of course, Charlie that's disagreeing with Thomas, what Thomas wishes, because it's like, hey man, like like, this might create a whole entire war with you doing this. Like, this is the worst possible thing that you could try to do. And Thomas is like, just do what I say. So Charlie's like, all right. So, because he has a place to perfectly hide this. So it's like, all right, okay, cool. So we go on in this episode, and hopefully by now, I think roughly we have a good chunk of things that have technically have been covered through this episode. So we go on and we have this girl called Grace, who is to make her way into this bar. So she is to make it to this bar to talk to this bartender about getting a job, and this guy is like, no, like, you're too pretty, you're too nice, no, it's not gonna work. And so the girl who is Grace is to, I guess, know a bunch of Irish folk songs, or just Irish songs. And so immediately what she's doing is cleaning the spit jar and going on and continuing to sing this song. And we have Grace that's mentioning to this bartender that whenever she would go on and whenever she would sing, guys would either stop fighting or guys would go on and just listen to her. And so the bartender is just like, well, hopefully you know a ton of songs then, because he's willing to hire her. So we go on and we have Grace, who's new at this, and so we have the bartender who is to see Thomas, and so the bartender is to say that Thomas is to get a thing of alcohol on the house, and so Grace is going on and talking to Thomas, and so Thomas is saying, it's like, well, like, it doesn't seem like you're a like a prostitute of sorts. And so he kind of walks off, and Grace is like, oh my god, like, he just called me, like. And so the bartender is like, well, hey, like, freaking, that's what happens when when you're as good looking as you are. So next time around, when I tell you that somebody's getting something on the house, just say nothing and just give it to them. Just really, like, we're more and more having it to where Grace is probably not going to be able to say anything at this point, because when eventually Grace is to go on and sing the song and have everybody kind of go on and sing with her, all of a sudden, once Thomas kind of walks into this bar, everybody slowly but surely starts to become dead silent, and the bartender is going to Thomas and saying, like, well, hey, like, it's been such a long time since we've gone on and sang in this bar, since possibly the wars. And Thomas is like, well, maybe there's a whole reason for that. So we we find out something very interesting about Grace. We go on and we actually find out that Grace is to, I guess, be an undercover agent working for Inspector Chester. Going on and having Grace, who is, of course, finding out quite a bit of information and finding out how, like, barbaric some of these people, I guess, are to live in this town. So we go on and we have Inspector Chester, who is telling Grace that her father would be proud because he had gone on and worked alongside her father. And so we, of course, have Grace, who is thinking really that if Inspector Chester is going to go after anybody, it honestly should be Thomas, because it really feels like Thomas is to be the ringleader of the Peaky Blinders. And we have it to where Inspector's like, well, is that attraction that I'm sensing here? And Grace is like, no, like, it's just like the obvious, like, choice here, because it seems that every time everybody's just kind of looking at Thomas to wipe their noses, so to speak, compared to everyone else. So, or scratch their noses in this case. So we go on in this episode, and so we we find out that Inspector Chester is going and getting word from, of course, Winston Churchill, uh, which don't know his actual significance in history. I know the name does sound familiar. I have seen it from time to time, but I can't really quite place it quite yet. But eventually we'll get there. Um, but it seems that both these characters going and are kind of having Inspector Chester kind of giving Winston Churchill a briefing about what all he has done so far, and Churchill is kind of going over this guy's resume, kind of saying like, "Oh, he was in Belfast, but now he's here. Like, what has he done so far?" And we have like a review of what technically he has gone and done so far. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, so we'll kind of see if this kind of produces results, and to go and find where these machine guns are, because we of course have it to where there's suspicions of who is to possibly have had these machine guns. Um, some people have the conspiracy of that it's the IRA, or that it could be some other people somewhere. And Inspector Chester is saying like, well, whoever it is, I will figure out who it is, and I will get these machine guns back. Whoever. If it's the IRA, I will bring them down. If it's so and so people, I will bring them down. If it's if it's my own mother, I will bring them down. Basically, that's what he's really just saying here to Winston Churchill. I'm paraphrasing, but it is what it is for this show. So yeah, I think that's all. Question mark. I think that's it for this episode, and I've only gone on and talked about it for 32 minutes. Wow, that's kind of nice to have that kind of gap of time and whatever, and kind of felt like I've covered everything, but I'm not quite 100% sure as per always. But let me know in the comments below if there's probably a billion things that I probably had forgotten about, because I'm sure there is. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about Peaky Blinders. Maybe you like this show. Maybe you hate this show. Maybe you're like, oh, this is the worst thing. I've seen all 5 episodes and I hate it. Like, okay, so you've watched all 5 seasons and you just really like to hate this show. Like, maybe that can just be Batwoman weirdly for a lot of folks who just don't like Batwoman. Just watch it regardless. They're like, I hate this show, but I'm gonna keep watching it anyways. There are those people out there. I don't know why they exist, but they exist. Um, so yeah, I'm also kind of interested in just like a time period piece of this show. Um, yeah. So with that said, yeah, I think that's all that I want to go in to talk about here. Um, we of course have the Peaky Blinders, the Shelby family, all collectively talk amongst one another in this episode. But I feel like any exchanges from that is really just be when Arthur is to have been beaten up, and we have the Shelby family all going and talking amongst one another, because Arthur is saying that the inspector is to talk Arthur into having a family meeting, for them to go on and try to help this inspector with this investigation. And we're going on and having this family go on and talk about certain things, and that none of them have really any interest in kind of working with this inspector, blah 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 blah. So um yeah, other than that, we just have it where like uh we of course find out that that Ada is to try to like take care of Arthur, but we go on and have Thomas who's also trying to do that also. We had Ada who tells Freddy that, of course, there is to be this inspector from Belfast here, and Freddy's like, "Yeah, I heard something about that." Um, Other than that, I think anything else that I was to just kind of say here, really like isn't going to be like really profound or whatever. Like, oh yeah, like this is to happen. Um, so I think I'm going to head out. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.